So, welcome Bob, and to everyone else who is online. As you hop on, hopefully some folks will. The October meeting, and we're going to just go right ahead and get into the meat and potatoes of this meeting. So first, again, news and housekeeping, as we've been doing lately. So, upcoming camera announcements. Yes, Photo Plus Expo starts tomorrow in New York City. And it's been gaining a bit of prominence as Photokina has been waning for some strange reason. Photokina being there was a giant show that would happen in Cologne, Germany every 2 years. Then a couple years ago, they decided to go annually, and then their attendance just dropped like a rock. And now they're thinking of rescheduling it they didn't do it this year in September when they normally did it, and they're thinking of rescheduling it to the spring of next year. So I don't know and if they may or may not go back to a 2-year cycle, I don't know. But in this case, the New York show has now gained prominence, and so normally I would attend the New York show, but I've lost my free sofa in New York, so as my sister has moved down here. But those situations may change for next year. I'll be able to attend, I think. So among the things we're expecting, and some of them have already happened, Fujifilm will announce their X Pro 3. Their last camera was the X-T3. That was their flagship APS-C camera. And this is their rangefinder styled program. It's a little hard to read. I will read it out for you. It has a back illuminated 26.1 megapixel sensor, same as in the X-T3. It has an improved autofocus algorithms over the X-T3. Those will probably be backported to the X-T3 as well. The body is now made out of titanium and magnesium and is weather sealed all to hell. It's like they are going for the ultimate street camera. It has, it's really hard for me to read it too. Oh, they've been doing a lot of work to make this a really JPEG friendly camera. So it does a lot of things like it can do collages and some really nice HDR using JPEGs. You still have the option of RAW files and do all the work yourself, but they are really making it more for JPEG shooters. This is a pro level camera, so it has the usual pro level things, 2 slots, weather sealing, the whole 9 yards. They were originally guessing the price of the body at around $2,000. But it was announced this morning at midnight, and the body in black is $16.99. But if you get their Duracast super hard titanium reinforced titanium, the black one is titanium, but it just has a regular black coating on it. But if you use their Duracast black or their Duracast silver, which frankly look a little bit gray-green to me, both. One looks grayer and the other one looks greener. Those will cut you close to $1,900. It is a pricey camera, but not as pricey as some of the other cameras that are being announced. Now, Leica, our favorite German camera company, will be announcing the SL2, which is their full frame 35 millimeter mirrorless professional camera. This one will now be sporting a 47 megapixel sensor. It will be weather sealed. It will have the same electronic viewfinder as in the Panasonic S1R, which is 5.5 megapixels OLED display. By the way, on the Fuji, another thing they did was they improved the Fuji X Pro 3 is a weird camera because it has a hybrid viewfinder. You can either have it optical, like a classic rangefinder, or you can flip it to be an electronic viewfinder. And on the X Pro 2, as an X Pro 2 owner, while the electronic viewfinder is very handy, it's also fairly terrible. They are replacing it on the X Pro 3 with a 3 megapixel OLED, high colored, high resolution, high refresh rate unit. So that's part of the reason for the cost increase. This one, however, the SL2 and its predecessor, the SL, has quite possibly the best electronic viewfinder I have ever seen in my entire life. If you're keen to try one out or just get your hands on it, Lake Store Miami, which is in Coral Gables, has them, and will have these in stock, and I can let you know when they have them. They have SLs in stock, but you can go and see, and you can go and see it there. If you're ever going to the place, it's like entering a jewelry store, literally. With good reason. The body of this camera is expected to cost almost 6,000 euros, or probably around $5,500 US, and that's just the body. The lenses are also $2,500 and up. It's a very expensive camera. Some people just absolutely swear by them. I'm a former Leica owner. I had the M8, their first digital camera, and that was, warts and all, it was a really nice camera, but my vision, it was manual focus, and I have astigmatism, and their focusing mechanism is the worst for people with astigmatism because you had to line up a box, and for me the vertical edges were always fuzzy because, like I said, I have astigmatism, and they didn't put in they didn't have a built-in diopter adjustment. You actually had to buy diopter filters and screw them onto the viewfinder. It was quite old school. But not all the announcements are wallet destroying. Nikon will be demoing their Z50, just recently announced, the latest camera in their Z for you, Bob, the Z line. The previous two ZZ cameras were the Z6 and the Z7, being 24 and 45 megapixels, respectively. This one is a 20.9 megapixel camera, but it's using the smaller APS-C sensor, also known as DX in Nikon speak. And this one, the body retails for $859.95. You can probably pick up a nice little kit for around $1,000. Okay? Don't let anybody else fool you. Mirrorless is the future. And this is one way to get into mirrorless. Now, of course, mirrorless full frame is really where it's at. But if you're not going to be doing this professionally and you want to just do it to entertain yourself, APS-C is always a good choice. And 20 megapixels is a pretty decent size. So, next up is our gallery is now open. As you have seen, we have my photos hanging in there. That's my Visions of Japan exhibition. It's technically called our exhibition space. And they are expecting us to put shows up every quarter. So, it is open to all members. Anyone who wants to participate is simply on the hook for the cost of printing and framing their image. Okay? At the end of today's lesson, I will announce the gallery challenge for December. We will always be changing up the show on the 15th of the last month of the quarter. So the last show, my show started on September 15th. So on December 15th will be our next show. And then on March, and then in June, and then in September again. Giving you guys 3 months to figure it out and get your act together. Because I know it takes us a little bit of time to get traction. We're live on YouTube. So, again, please join the mailing list. I can't do this for you. You have to sign up for the mailing list. It's https www.freelists.org/list/ITD Photo Club. This is how I will be sending out all club notifications from now on, so we don't use the county facilities. Okay? Especially for the gallery announcements and that sort of thing, I will be doing it through that. Okay? And on to the beginner class. Well, for the last 8 lessons, we have been slugging through all of the controls in the computer, the camera. Enough of that. Camera basics number 7 is composition. We're finally getting into the art of photography as opposed to the science of it. Okay? So no more babbling about gear, time to babble about photos and how to take them. But the gear explanation was required because if I start talking about how to do this and how to do that and how did you get it to look that way, if you don't understand the technology behind your camera, you don't know how to steer it. Mind you, you are perfectly capable of leaving it on auto and applying these rules and still getting halfway decent photographs. When I was teaching middle school children, I actually had a first grader come into the class, and the little bum was born with the eye. He had an eye for composition at 7 years old. And he would take the most spectacular photographs of the class, just showing up middle school kids all the time. And all he did was leave it on auto, and he just concentrated on composition. So, composition and composition rules. Okay? Many of the rules in TICS of composition predate photography by thousands of years. Artists have been doing this stuff since cave paintings. Okay? Like I said, I use quotes around the word rules because they aren't actually rules. They're kind of guidelines and rules of thumb. And it's okay to break the rules. In fact, that was one of our challenges, was to break the rules. Okay? But does breaking the rules always work? Sometimes if you're lucky. But if you know the rules well enough that you can take nice photographs using the rules, then you will see when the opportunity arises that breaking the rule will get you a nice photograph as well. Just not paying attention to the rules from the beginning is basically rolling the dice. Knowing the rules, knowing how to shoot using the rules, and then seeing the opportunity present itself is the way you can guarantee, or not guarantee, but at least greatly increase your chances of getting a really good photograph, even though you broke the rules of composition. Okay? So there's about 20 rules of composition, and I'm not going to talk about all 20 tonight. We're going to be doing them in chunks so we can discuss it and have question and answer and whatever you want. Okay? So the first one, okay, so first of all, the definition. Okay? And all of the photos that you've seen so far in this presentation have been examples of compositional rules. Like here we had leading lines. And here we have framing. Okay? So, composition refers to the way various elements in a scene are arranged within the frame. And like I said, these aren't hard and fast. They're guidelines, and they've been around for thousands of years. Okay? You can learn photography compositional rules by going to an art museum and looking at the great masters. They all did it too. All of the stuff we use, chiaroscuro, rule of thirds, leading lines, rule of diagonals, all the ones you can imagine, all of them are taken from the great masters. The most common one is rule of thirds. And if you really want to dig into the weeds about rule of thirds, it is, again, the most commonly used one. It is an adaptation of a bit of mathematics called Fibonacci squares. The Italian mathematician Fibonacci discovered that if you have a rectangle that has a ratio of 3 to 2, in other words, twice the long side is equal to 3 times the length of the short side, which is a typical, that's pretty typical for cameras these days. That's a typical aspect for most modern cameras. If you were to take that rectangle and draw a line on it to make it a square, you would be left with a square and a rectangle. The leftover rectangle would also be 3 by 2. And if you repeated that process, taking the 3 by 2 rectangle and turning it into a square, and taking the leftover rectangle and repeating the process on the leftover rectangle, you would have a series of squares. And if you then went through the corners of all the squares, drawing a line, you would draw a spiral. And depending on which way you started, the spiral would end up spinning up into 4 particular points. Rule of thirds, which by the way is implemented in most cameras. If your camera says turn on a 3 by 3 grid, that's rule of thirds. Rule of thirds is a rough approximation of that. That Fibonacci sequence is known as the golden mean. It is naturally occurring. Have you ever heard of a creature called a nautilus? You know, it's a little shelled mollusk. It's like a little squid that has a hard shell. If you ever find a nautilus shell and you were to bisect it in half so that it would have two mirrored sides, if you open it up, you look at the spiral, and the inside of it is a series of spiral chambers that is exactly a golden mean, a Fibonacci sequence. It is exactly that. It occurs naturally in nature. For all you computer historians out there, there was a database product called Sybase a few years ago, and their logo was a nautilus shell, which again was the golden mean. Well, the rule of thirds, instead of drawing curlicues on the screen for you, draws a tic-tac-toe board, and the 4 intersecting points of the rule of thirds approximates the exact location of the golden mean. Those 4 points and the lines associated with them, believe it or not, make for better photographs. For example, you'll notice in this photograph, the lighthouse, or lifeguard stand, I guess, looks like a little, could be both. Anyway, that lifeguard stand is not in the center of the photograph. It actually has one of the lines of the rule of thirds bisecting it down the middle. And compared to one that would have the image in the middle, this is a much more appealing photograph. Among other things, your eye is naturally drawn to the bottom of the railing, you know, the floor. See like the balcony up on top, around the hood. See it up there on the top? There's like there's the balcony, right? And the line intersects right at the base of the balcony. Your eye is naturally drawn to that spot. That's the magic of the golden mean. Don't ask me why that happens, it just happens. Anything in those intersections, our eye is naturally drawn to those spots. So if you take a portrait in portrait mode, turning it sideways, and you put the person's eye in that crosshair, your vision will automatically be drawn to that person's eye, or whatever, or the tip of their nose, or whatever you did, or if it's a further back shot, their head, you'll be drawn to looking at their face. Whatever's in those crosshairs, you will naturally, even if the crosshairs aren't there, you will be naturally attracted to seeing that. This is the most common rule of composition, okay? And like I said, it's implemented in most cameras. Like I said, if your camera has a grid function, you can turn the grid on, and then you can use it to help you compose the shot. The next rule we're going to look at is breaks rule of thirds, and that is centered composition with symmetry. Now, whereas I said before that having something in the middle is generally not a good photograph, well, yes, but if the something in the middle happens to have something symmetric on either side of it, creating a mirror effect, then it does work. Like I said, these are all guidelines. They're not actually rules. All right? This is and it could be, sometimes they have leading lines. This could also be construed as the leading lines, as the bridge and its reflection, the two bridges and their reflections seem to draw you to the middle of the photograph. Okay? By the way, going back to rule of thirds a second. Waiting for the picture to come on. There we go. Another use of rule of thirds is the horizontal lines are also good if you're doing a landscape to put the horizon on that line. If you want to get more sky, use the lower line. If you want to get more foreground element, use the upper line. Again, it helps for better composition. Okay? So this one, fairly obvious. If you have something that is reflected or it's symmetric, then a centered composition is the way to go. In this case, having rule of thirds and shifting it off to one side would throw the whole image out of balance. So, foreground, interest, and depth. And I've mentioned this in other classes, where instead of just having your subject be in, and this could also include rule of thirds. This is Yosemite Falls. I took this photograph this year, and you'll notice that the waterfall is almost at the rule of thirds line, but I kept all of the lower foreground material in the shot to frame it. I also have another shot that I did of Half Dome where I had tree branches and stuff framing around the image, and it helped to focus your view onto Half Dome. Ansel Adams, who is famous for photographing Yosemite and was considered the premier landscape artist of the United States, hated negative space. He hated photographs that had emptiness in them. He liked to have shots with clouds and sky and tree branches and all kinds of things framing his images. Just a stark picture of the mountain in a clear blue sky, even if it was black and white, was boring to him. He wanted cloudy skies. He wanted elements surrounding his image so that he could, so he would negate the negative space. Okay? This also gives a three-dimensional feel to your images. As, yeah, that's somebody who's getting ready to donate organs. Anyway. So those are the three we're going to talk about today. I will get some links to articles that explain this a little bit better, more in depth. If you can, Petapixel has a really good series on this, and so I would suggest you take a look at that if you want to practice. And these are easy to practice because you can practice this anywhere. You don't have to go to Yosemite to do this. You can do this anywhere. Like I said, learning this stuff and seeing images is not the same as going out and trying it yourself. Because that's the real trick here, is doing it yourself. So, as opposed to the monthly challenge, since we're so backlogged on monthly challenges, I am issuing the gallery challenge. This is for the December gallery event. Again, anyone who wants to participate, it's open to all club members. We're going to hang 11 photos. Okay? And the theme is your best shot. Your favorite photograph, the one you feel is the best one you've taken so far. Okay? Doesn't have to be new. Doesn't have to be color. Doesn't have to be black and white. Doesn't have to have a theme to it. Okay? Now, if you are going to participate, the deadline for submission is the 16th of November. I need to see what photographs you are submitting to the it's not a competition, it's just an exhibition. We're not competing. There's not going to be any winners. You will be on the hook for printing this in 16 by 20 and for framing it with a 2-inch mat and a 1-inch black frame, the way we have the Japan exhibition downstairs. If you want to do a group order, I can talk to the lady who does my framing. She gets pretty good prices. It's frame on wheels. If we do it as a batch, I can probably get it for about $23 to $25 per image. She does, however, do reframing. So if you're going to participate in later ones, you don't have to buy a new frame unless you've decided to keep the other photograph that you exhibited and you want to hang it up somewhere for yourself personally. She will reframe your photographs for you. So that's a way to save money. Okay? Again, the exhibition will be on December 15th. I need the submissions by November 16th so that we can go and have make our choices and then get the printing done and not go berserk, being as we have holidays in the way. So that pretty much does it for us. And I'd like to thank everyone for coming, and hope you see this online, and I hope to see lots of participation in the gallery challenge. And please try to make up for the other challenges that we've had so far. The videos are all here on the YouTube channel. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me or send emails via the mailing list, because the mailing list is not one way. You guys can use it too to ask questions of the group. So feel free to use that. It's there for you. It doesn't cost a cent. I set it up for you guys. So thanks for watching.